Hi, I'm Louise Wood and I co-lead the NIHR, and I'm really delighted to be supporting the UK's first Dementia Research Careers Festival. So it's a great opportunity to showcase the range and breadth of dementia research that's happening across the country, and to encourage you to think about a career in dementia research.
Dementia makes, I think, a very good career choice. I think it's just fascinating in its complexity. The human brain is a wonderful instrument, and we just need the best people with the best minds, who are highly motivated to come and make a difference.
We know that for every scientist working in dementia research, there are 4 scientists working in cancer research. This means that probably increasing the number of scientists working on dementia, we will easily reach a treatment and getting a better understanding of these diseases.
To be successful nowadays in science, you need diversity. You need people from all kinds of walks of life to find solutions for the problems which we are studying. So nowadays you need chemists, biologists, mathematicians, bioinformaticians, medical doctors, psychologists to solve the deep problems of the brain, and especially for the big problem we are facing, which is dementia.
So much more needs to be done, and we need to attract in the next generation of dementia researchers.
It's involved not just interactions with patients and clinicians, which has been extremely rewarding, but interactions with basic laboratory researchers, with biophysicists, with molecular biologists, with neuropsychologists, but also with architects, those who are experts in the built environment, with philosophers, because of the insights in how the human brain works, and with artists and musicians.
Race Against Dementia was founded by Formula One world champion Sir Jackie Stewart. We not only award grants to support early career dementia researchers, but we also provide them with a program of developmental opportunities inspired by best practice in Formula One and other high-tech commercial enterprises. We want to supercharge the next generation of scientists to make the much-needed breakthroughs in both the understanding and intervention in the diseases that cause dementia.
So I hope that through the resources, the case studies and the events this week, you will think seriously about dementia research as a career. As I've said, there is huge unmet need, massive opportunity to make a difference. There's increased funding being pumped into the field. So please think seriously about how you can bring your talents and insights into tackling this awful disease. Go on, think seriously about it.
Good morning. I am Anna-Louise Smith. I'm the Research Engagement Manager at Alzheimer Society, and I'm absolutely delighted to be hosting or chairing this session and the first session of Dementia Research Careers Festival. I'm joined today by 3 lovely guests who are in the research network at Alzheimer Society. So the research network are 350 people or thereabouts in total, all people who are affected by dementia, either as carers, former carers, or people living with a diagnosis. And they help to inform our research program, and they also work with, they inspire, they inform researchers in the dementia research field. So I'll allow you to introduce yourselves. Jane, shall we start with yourself, your name and your role in the network? And then we'll ask some more questions in a minute.
Okay, I'm having a few technical issues at the moment. My system seems to have stopped, so I'm onto my iPhone, so hopefully you can hear me. I'm Jane Ward from the Research Network.
Thank you. John?
Hi Anna, I'm John Hammond, and I'm a volunteer also with the Alzheimer Society Research Network, and a volunteer on the Biomedical Grant Advisory Panel. I was a former caregiver for my mum who lived with Alzheimer's disease in the final years of her life.
Thank you, John. And Amy.
Hi everyone, I'm Amy Burrell. I'm the area coordinator for the West Midlands. So for the research network, my father was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's at the age of 57, and we are currently in year 7 of his diagnosis. So he is still with us and living in a care home at the moment.
Great, thank you everybody. And hello, Adam.
Hello. Sorry, I wasn't quite sure when you wanted me. I should have asked.
Adam, do you want to say a bit about the week ahead?
Sure. I've got a small couple of numbers, a couple of slides, which I'll just very quickly share with everybody. So thank you very much for joining us today. I'm Adam Smith. I'm the Program Director at the National Office, the NIHR Office of the National Director for Dementia Research. And we're delighted to have people with us today for the first webinar of our Dementia Research Careers Festival. I'm just going to touch on 3 things really briefly, which you can see on the screen there, which is reasons we think you should consider a career in dementia research, and some of the examples of what you can do with your degree or your training or your experience to date, and what we're going to do for Careers Week as well. So 3 reasons. The first reason I kind of want to highlight, which is particularly important to us and one I feel passionate about, which is that you genuinely can help people living with dementia. So you've met 3 people today already who I know will hope that research can find some answers and bring improvements to care, diagnosis, treatment, prevention, and so many things in the future. It's been 16 years since there was a new drug released for dementia, and people really do benefit from the research that takes place. There's a blog published in our careers website page by Dr. Anna Volkmer, who's a speech and language therapist at UCL, that talks to some of the developments that have happened just over the last 10 years, which have only been possible because of research. And these include things like cognitive behavioral therapy, which has made some real changes to supporting people to live well with the disease, changes to understanding that changes to lifestyle can delay the onset of some of the symptoms, and also potentially, prevent people developing the disease in the first place. Some of the research has found new biomarkers to help us discover if people have problems earlier on. Music and art therapy is making a difference in so many ways to help people support and live with the symptoms that they have. We've got people looking at data to understand the potential for repurposing other drugs and things like that. So the research that you could potentially do as you consider a future in dementia research can make a real difference to people's lives. And then other reasons, the brain is one of the few parts of the human body that we still have very little understanding of, which means that it's a fantastic field to research in, and a real place where you can stand out from the crowd and make a difference. And as you'll have heard before, there are 4 times as many cancer researchers as there are people in dementia, which means also as well the field of research is still developing. There are still not enough researchers, which means there is a real opportunity to make a difference and stand out. And also, the point I'm going to make in my next slide is that there really are opportunities for everybody, no matter what you studied at university or whatever your interests. There really are opportunities for everyone. And as I come through and give you some examples, so there are chemists and biologists and neuroscientists working in labs to understand what's going on in the brain. And to develop new treatments and new drugs. You've got artists, musicians, creatives, and artists are doing some great art therapy. We've got a webinar on that on Tuesday, tomorrow, looking at how some artists and musicians have brought their talents to dementia research. Music and dementia is a program that's had lots of publicity this year and has made a real difference to people's lives. Filmmakers explaining things that are going on, communicators to help scientists to disseminate messages. You've got coders and data analysts and mathematicians who have made a huge difference as well to taking large data sets from the NHS, for example, to understand how we can understand how the disease is progressing or whether it's increasing or decreasing. Tech developers are looking at wearable technology and things like how to use your smartphone or your wearable devices to track onset of symptoms. So there really are opportunities for everybody, no matter what your background, which we really want to highlight. So for Careers Week, just to say we have, this is Alliance. They have a website themselves, which you can visit and tweet and share. Please do on social media using the hashtag NCW2021. We have webinars at 12:30 every day. I think to 12:30 lunchtime today is the scientists and lab-based researchers. On Tuesday, we have the artists and musicians and creative arts researchers. On Wednesday, we have the technology and the coders. On Thursday is psychologists and people working in care, in care homes and in hospitals. And then on Friday, we have healthcare professionals. So we have some speech and language therapists, a nurse and an OT and others discussing how they've turned their hands to dementia research. And then on Friday, we have a coffee hour at 4 p.m. where you can pop along and meet a whole range of early career researchers working all across the country in different fields in a very informal kind of setting. Our website, dementiaresearcher.nihr.ac.uk/careers, has got most of our content is live there now. There are lots of links to other places on the internet where you can get advice and support. You can book into all of our webinars there. We've made several films and podcasts, especially for this event, to talk to researchers. There's also a whole range of blogs talking about people's careers and how they found themselves where they are, and some advice on things like how to get experience. And we've created a brand new directory of every further education dementia training and education course that we can across the country, which you can access from our website as well. So thank you very much for giving me a minute to share that. We hope that this week's inspiring to young people to consider taking a career in dementia research, and hope you'll join us in some of our webinars, and hope that today's session really was all about giving you that motivation you might need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you very much. So yes, we're absolutely delighted, and it's an honor to be able to offer our words of experience and really inspire people who are entering the field of research and thinking, is dementia the thing I want to be researching? And we would say, yes, absolutely, for goodness sake, we need you across a breadth of ways in which you can do that. So yes, the purpose of our session is to really inspire researchers and to bring the lived experience to the forefront. So we could give you the list of stats. We've put out there, 850,000 people are affected by dementia throughout the UK. We haven't had a new treatment in 16 years. The treatments that we have do not slow down or reverse dementia. And it's not just around the lab-based research or the desperate search for the cure. There are so many other areas that really need attention as well. So we're going to explore that a bit. So what is dementia? Dementia is a term that describes a series of symptoms that are caused by a variety of diseases. So Alzheimer's disease is the most common. Vascular dementia is due to a blockage in the oxygen in blood vessels. But what we're here today, because you are going to have clinical researchers talking about the whys and wherefores of dementia throughout the week. what we're here today is to talk about what is dementia for real people, and why is research important to them. So I'm going to ask that question of our three lovely guests, and they all have varying degrees of experience, and obviously dementia is unique to each person that experiences it. So it's really important that you understand that there's no one experience of dementia. So I would like to start with Jane. If you could please answer the question, why is dementia research important from the perspective of people affected by dementia for you?
Well, as you said, we've got no cure, no treatment for so long. So we need to find treatment. We need to find something, hopefully a cure one day. But that's not going to happen anytime soon, because there's so many different types of dementia. And every single day, as you mentioned, 850,000 people or so and their loved ones wake up and have to live with dementia. So we do need to find ways to help people to get through it. We need to find ways to help people understand what's going on, better ways of actually dealing with it. We need better ways for doctors to be able to treat those people. And we need to just, well, understand what's going on.
Yeah. And in terms of, if someone were to ask you what is dementia, from your experience, from how things went with your mum, how would you answer that question? What was dementia for you and your mum?
Dementia is a bit like having the rug pulled from under you. I mean, I didn't have a chance to properly introduce myself earlier. Sorry, I'm back in, hopefully online.
That's okay.
But yeah, my mother had vascular dementia and diagnosed in 2007, but that was following a brain scan in 2005 that got lost. So we struggled with what we thought was depression for a while, although it didn't feel like depression. But when we did get the diagnosis, it was actually a bit of a relief understanding what we were dealing with. And after a little bit of shell shock, because my background is research, I started researching. So I don't think it was such a bad experience. And she was such a positive person, but it was learning to time travel effectively. I didn't know from almost moment to moment quite where her brain was going to be, you know, where her now was. So it was just an incredible 6-7 years of always being a little bit on the back foot, trying to understand what she was dealing with and how to help her through it, and dealing with everyone else out there. And to be honest, a lot of the medical guys we came across weren't very aware of what was going on from our point of view, because it doesn't always fit the textbooks. So yes, it was an interesting, I think about 7 years, just learning how to deal with something that was changing so quickly, particularly towards the end. Almost moment by moment, you didn't quite know what was going to happen next. And then if you had an infection coming in, wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite a, I'll use that word, it's quite a journey.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you, Jane.
Right.
John, I'll come to you next. So same question, why is dementia research important from your perspective, and bearing in mind the journey that you went on with your mum?
Yeah, I would echo many of Jane's sentiments, of course. I do completely appreciate that dementia, and this is something I think that researchers maybe need a certain insight into, that dementia is a very unique experience, and we talk about that all of the time. So if you've met one person who's been affected by dementia, you've met one person affected by dementia, and everybody's story is so individual and so unique and so different. My experience was with my mum. My mum lived with Alzheimer's disease. So her formal diagnosis was Alzheimer's disease, but there was always a huge question mark over actually whether that was an accurate diagnosis. And that was part of our difficulty, because my mum was never able to engage with her diagnosis. She didn't want to believe or accept or acknowledge in any way that she was unwell or living with anything which she thought was even dementia. It was a terribly scary, I think, frightening concept to her. And I think that's something that researchers, in my mind, need to appreciate as well, the huge stigma maybe around that still exists, I think, around dementia. We strive, I think, within our research network and our community and with the society to kind of alleviate as much of that stigma, I think, as possible, and really work for a diverse and inclusive society. But I think there's a lot of work to do, and I think research can really advance that too, some of that understanding on a society level, I guess, to take us forward in some of those regards. So my mum, unfortunately, was not able to acknowledge or kind of accept that this was happening to her. And of course, that had an ongoing ripple effect throughout our entire family. It had an effect on every part of anybody who loved and cared for my mum, for me, for example, on an emotional level, on a financial level, on a relationship level, because identities are all confused too. Am I now son? Am I caregiver? Am I, what am I? So there's a huge amount of what on earth is happening, as Jane was saying, what on earth is happening and what on earth is becoming of all of us involved in this whole experience. And I guess research comes down to that, answering some of those questions. What is this? What that ultimately, when research is boiled down to a question, it's trying to find answers to some of those things, some of those, looking at the experiences of caregivers, looking at the experiences of persons with dementia, as well as obviously striving ultimately for a cure. But I think my challenge, I guess, to researchers who might be considering a move into this area, and I echo your sentiment, Anna, please do, the more the merrier. We need you all on board. We need all of our collective resources and knowledge and pool of experiences, is to engage, I guess, and encourage persons living with diagnosis of dementia to be part of your studies too. So I hear often research where interviews are conducted, for example, of caregivers or healthcare professionals. And my question often to researchers is, where's the person's voice with dementia in this? And that's a challenge of its own, because again, we come back full circle. Dementia is a unique experience with people living a unique set of changing day-to-day symptoms, but that should remain a challenge. I think that we still continually put persons with dementia at the very heart of research.
Fantastic. Thank you, John. Wonderful. And Amy, same question. Why is dementia research important from your perspective, from the perspective of your dad and what you guys have been through?
I think the biggest thing for us would be a bit of focus on quality of life. I think living well with dementia is really important. I think people think you have a diagnosis of dementia and then they kind of visualize the end of the journey without realizing that there's lots and lots of steps in between. And actually, my dad took part in research in the earlier stages of his dementia, where he was being brain scanned on a regular basis, and he was talking to a researcher about how he was feeling, and he was able to articulate things like, having dementia is a bit like always having that actor's name on the tip of your tongue and you can't quite get it, but it's for everything. Or it's like I'm stood in a corridor with a load of locked doors and I've got a bunch of keys and I don't know which key goes in which lock. And he was able to talk about dementia actually in quite an articulate way for quite a long time. And I think people kind of assumed that because he had dementia, that meant that he wasn't able to contribute anything. And that I think is something that we really need to get past. People need to recognize that there are different steps on the journey. And although I wouldn't advocate probably trying to interview my dad at the moment, so we're very progressed now in his dementia. There were certainly 2 or 3 years at the beginning of his journey where he was able to contribute something really valuable. And I think for us as a family, it would have been nice for people to recognise that early onset is a thing, that there are additional challenges that are faced when you're a working family, and he suddenly can't work, and we are all still working, and it's very difficult. I think there were things like his dementia medication, his medication he had initially. We had to pay for his prescription because he wasn't old enough to get a free prescription. I'm like, he has dementia. They were like, oh, it's not on the list of free medication. Like, why not? That's ridiculous. So there's lots of things that I found that are perhaps a little unique to the early journey, where people just don't really realise, or he doesn't look ill. Well, no, he doesn't look ill. That doesn't mean he's not struggling, and trying to maintain his independence for as long as possible was really important to us. And so any research that would help us to improve quality of life, to give people independence for as long as possible in as safer way as possible, that would have been fantastic. And I always describe dementia as a constant set of problem solving. Every day is a new puzzle. And so, my sister used to ring me up and say, "You speak, Dad, can you work out what this is that we're trying to, what's the problem?" And I think some more kind of understanding of how much you need to adapt, and how persistent it is, how much you're needing to adjust, and every day is different, and no day is there's always a new challenge. And I think sometimes research can kind of just focus on the end of the journey, or just focus on the cure, and forget about all of that stuff that's in between, that's actually most people living with dementia right now. So that would be my message, I think.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think a fundamental step in approaching research is really identifying the right questions to address, both out of interest for the researcher, of course, but it's about finding those priorities for the people that are going to benefit ultimately from your research. So yeah, I'd really like to explore this idea of how a new researcher, I don't want to say young, because I think people can start research at any age, but someone approaching dementia research as a starting point, what would be a good way for them to find those priorities? So Jane, of course, I'm going to say involve people affected by dementia, but yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Just speak to people, get out there, talk to people, maybe visit groups, or come talk to some of the people, because we have got people living with dementia in the research network. There's the DEEP network, so Innovations Dementia Run, that lots of people getting together, and they're already doing an awful lot of really good stuff. But go and talk to them. Talk about the problems they're having, and maybe if something then you think, oh, I'd love to do that, then form the question with them. And as Amy was saying, people are very articulate. My mother maybe couldn't even find the bathroom, but she could tell you exactly what she wanted. She always was an articulate lady. And they like to be involved. Unfortunately, I never had the opportunity for Mum to be involved in the research. But we used to work with our local council, and they were doing a piece of work on what older people, so in general, what older people want out of life. So they're kind of living well, but with age. And there were two people with dementia, Mum and another guy, and they got so much out of it, because they were actually being asked, and as she said, there's lots of things I can't do, but one thing I can do is tell people what I need and what I want. And she felt, those were the good days. When we came back, she'd be absolutely shattered, but she'd be so happy because she actually felt she'd contributed. So go out and ask them, talk to them, find something that interests you as well.
Absolutely. I'm just going to say, I've noticed in our participation list that we've got quite a few people from the research network who are listening in. So there is a chat box function. If anyone in the network wants to offer advice as well, or your personal experience of dementia and why researchers could or should definitely get involved in dementia research, please put your comments in there, and we really want to inspire as many people as possible. John, over to you. Your ideas, your thoughts around prioritization and addressing those right research questions. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm in an interesting part of my own personal journey. I guess we go back to the J word. I'm completing my master's in dementia studies currently, and aspire to go on and conduct my own research in the future too. So I'm one of those potential early career researchers, but not a young person maybe, so a midlife early career researcher potentially. But I do have a real passion for, I think, understanding the effects of dementia on different communities within our society. So what does dementia look and feel and experience like for the Black, Asian, minority ethnic community? What does it what does it look like for the LGBTQ community? And I'm sure that there's huge differences. Again, my personal aspiration is for this inclusive society, but I'm really conscious that I'm sure just from hearing stories and talks and with other people who are caregivers or persons living with dementia, if they're parts of different elements of our society, their experiences are incredibly different. And I think, again, for me, that's a challenge for researchers, is to dig into that more, to try and find out what that is. So while we're looking for ultimately our cure or new treatments, we are investigating quality of life. We're investigating the experiences of those 850,000 and ever increasing numbers of people who wake up every day to an experience of dementia. And also, I think that if we're not careful, research will continue to focus on a particular demographic of our society and include study participants from a very particular demographic of our society. And I think my passion and aim would be to broaden that and to kind of investigate and really get a much better understanding of what it's like for all parts of our communities.
Absolutely, great point. Yeah, diversity and reaching every community, because dementia doesn't discriminate, doesn't have a favorite area. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, John. Really good point. Amy, same question to you. Looking at the idea of prioritization and addressing the right questions, what advice would you give to early researchers?
There is only one, really. Talk to people living with dementia and their families. I mean, I'm a researcher myself in a different field, and we talk a lot about kind of user-led research questions, and I think that that's exactly what we need to do with dementia. I think we need to talk to, because the journeys are so different. I mean, we've been on this journey for 7 years, and every day I learn new things about dementia, and everybody I speak to is a different experience. And I know that research can't capture everybody's experience, but there does need to be some acknowledgement that this has got to be led by what people living with dementia need right now. Very conscious that, you know, as much as everybody's kind of going for a cure, even 7 years ago, we knew that a cure wouldn't arrive in time for my dad. And you know, we've got to look at, okay, well, what are the things that would help him? What does he want? And we spent a lot of time talking to Dad about, what do you want to do? You know, he's quite a shy person, so he didn't want to go to particular groups, but he did want to spend time with his friends. He did want to spend time with me and my sister. He did want to you know, where I used to live, he knew the way to town, so he'd come and live with me for a couple of weeks, and he would take himself out on a particular route that he knew, and he'd have cash in his wallet and a phone with my number in it. And you know, for a couple of years he used to have that kind of independence where he knew where he was going, and it was only when they knocked a building down that he got stuck, and I got a phone call from somebody saying, are you know, his daughter? Not, yes, where is he? He's in such and such a pub. Oh, okay, right, I'll come get him. But it, you know, my mum used to really worry about it, but for us, for him, it was really important to have some independence. And I just think we had to kind of work it out, and I think that feels like we've done a lot of having to work it out ourselves. And I've been really fortunate to have had the community that I've had in Alzheimer's Society, and being part of the network in particular. You know, Jane and I have had many discussions about our journey, and that's been really, really valuable. But actually, a lot of the time, people who are living with dementia or caring for someone with dementia, they're on their own, and they're trying to do this by themselves, and they feel alone, and they don't know where to go. And I just think we need to be engaging with those people and working out, how can we help you? What could research do that could support you and make your life better?
Yeah, that's great answer. And I think it's been a surprise to us, working as we do in the field, working volunteering, to realize that some people don't have access. You know, they're researchers, they work in the field, they've got all the best intentions, they've got all the skills, but they might not know people affected by dementia in their immediate circles. So Jane, you mentioned DEEP. We are of course talking about the research network at Alzheimer's Society. The research network are people who are very interested in research and help with our research funding program. They also monitor our funded research. And beyond that, I think, Jane, you've done this, have ended up being co-applicants on some projects. So there's a real skill base there, as well as the lived experience. Beyond that, with Alzheimer's Society, we also have Dementia Voice, and they are people who are willing to be contacted and share their experiences in a host of ways. Any other thoughts from my three guests here today of how new researchers could engage with people affected by dementia? Yeah, Amy.
I was just going to say, and it's probably obvious from what I said before, but please don't make assumptions. That's probably the biggest thing that I could say, is don't talk to the carer rather than the person living with dementia. Don't assume that there's a particular experience. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day and he said, you talk about your dad very calmly. And I was like, it's taken us a long time to get to where we are with dad's condition and our new normal, as we talk about it. And I think there's people are kind of surprised that I'm not always in tears. And it's just like, that's not how it is. It is sad. I wish he didn't have dementia. Of course I do. But he's my dad. I love him, and I want to make the most of my time with him, whatever that looks like. And I've made my peace with that. And now it's all about building new memories for us. And I think that's what I mean. I think it's really important. I speak really openly about dementia and about our experience, and I know a lot of other people do too. Don't be afraid to ask us questions about it. If I don't want to answer, I'll say no, but please don't make an assumption. That would be my take home message, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. John or Jane, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I'd just say, for me, again, it wasn't a great thing to happen, but because of Mum's absolute positivity, I mean, she always was, her whole life, she was the most positive person. I used to struggle with depression, and she could be really annoying because she was so positive, and just didn't get what I was going through. But when dementia came, she wanted to know what was going on. We had long discussions, and she was very, very just there with me. We were almost partners on that journey, apart from the bad times, when particularly with infections and things, even just understanding what that was. As soon as the light bulb of, oh, it's because an infection's coming, we could get to the doctor really quickly, get her on antibiotics. But then we had swallowing difficulties, so loads of problems there. But she was with us on that journey. And you've just got to find as many people as you can, because there are so many different ways people experience this. I'm going to take a step back. Actually, the other organisation that's quite good is TIDE. It's a carers organisation. So it's Together in Dementia Every Day, I think. So yes, we definitely do need to include more people with dementia or living with dementia immediately with a diagnosis. But for carers, that's another way of finding a lot of people who are going through this experience. Absolutely. And you mentioned about me being a co-applicant. There's one project I'm on, and I'm very proud that our PPI group actually has, in fact, there's two projects I'm on. Both of them have people with dementia on the PPI groups.
That's patient and public involvement groups, for anyone who's not
public involvement. So one is looking at living well with dementia out of Exeter, and there's a thing called the Always group, and we've got the great Keith Oliver with us on that group from the network, and a couple of other guys. And we've actually gone to Congress, Dementia Congress, and talked. And I think the first time we went, Keith was actually able to chair our session, which was amazing. And
Keith is a person living with dementia.
Sorry, that's Keith with dementia. So he was actually chairing that session, and the impact of people realizing that he's not just standing on stage and speaking, he's actually chairing the rest of the rabble in the group. It was just incredible. And I'm on another one which is looking at end of life, and again, a subject that people don't often think that you should be talking about to someone living with dementia, but why not?
Exactly.
So that's the Embed Care group out of King's College and UCL, University College London. And we've got, again, two people living with dementia, and I'm really pleased. One of them is from the BAME group, and also he's LGBT. So he's bringing his own, and he's young onset. So he's incredible in that we've got someone who is speaking for some of the groups that don't usually get spoken for, but they were so enthusiastic to join. So don't be frightened to ask. As Amy said, you can say no, but you can't say yes if you don't ask them, should we say? So please do.
Yeah. John, would you like to add to that at all? Advice to researchers who are wanting to either find people affected by dementia, and once they have found them, how best to approach their questions?
Okay, I will certainly echo both Jane and Amy's comments, and just once again say to researchers, challenge your own assumptions and your own preconceptions of what you think people with dementia are. Who are these people in your minds? And rip up that kind of thought, I think, and start again. For me, once again, there's some really important, as Jane was talking about some of the studies she's involved in, there's a very important study, a nationwide study called Determined, which is looking at some of the inequalities and inequities to care and costs of care, etc. Which I think is very important because it's also looking at, again, the different experiences of dementia in different communities within our society. So I think that's a very exciting, ongoing, long-term study that's happening. Again, accessing maybe local communities as well. So where your researchers may be in their communities, there will be people who are supporting people, charities, other charities, as well as the Alzheimer's Society, often working in partnership with other charities too. And Alzheimer's Society does an incredible job of that, of reaching out to other community-based services and charities and partnering really successfully with those. So researchers will be in their community, bring it down to your community and start to kind of have a look and listen to what's going on. So for example, in Brighton, there is Switchboard, which has the Rainbow Cafe project, which supports LGBTQ persons living or affected by dementia and their caregivers. And again, you know, there'll be similar kind of charitable or community-based organizations. So reach out to them. They will all be delighted to hear from you. And also, I guess for researchers, just be mindful of your language and terminology. If you use words like research, even can be quite a scary word, and cognitive impairment and all this sort of medical terminology, I guess kind of, is it communication to be understood rather than communication to further your kind of, ability to kind of demonstrate your learned understanding? It's so kind of reach out to those communities and understand the communication that works for both parties. So don't be afraid. Get in touch with services that are happening in your area.
Fantastic. You've just hit on something that, Jane, I'm going to come to you in just a second. That issue of communication, and if a researcher's thinking, oh, you know, yes, I'll talk to people affected by dementia, either, you know, with a diagnosis or carers or former carers, but what's the benefit of actually getting them involved? You know, if I were to write that into my research project, at what point can they help? And you've just struck on a really important one there right at the beginning. How do you communicate what you're doing is going to be so important, not just for getting participants, but getting funding, you know.
And I think also as well, and I think just before, obviously, Jane, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something very exciting, I think, for researchers now at this point, where they hopefully might be able to shake up the model as well. You know, this sort of standard approach of journal published articles, you know, reach out and engage with your community, and maybe, you know, produce your research with people, co-produce that research, do it in a collaborative fashion and really shake it all up and do something exciting. Yeah. So, you know, that's another challenge, I guess, to researchers is, you know, do something exciting. What's your next step too? What do they envisage? Do they want to follow a very traditional model of what researchers that they've learned and what is expected of them, or can they do something more exciting and really engage with people living with dementia and do something completely different? You know, that's a good kind of challenge, I guess, to early career researchers.
Brilliant. Jane, well, you were going to say something.
I was just going to say the whole thing about the communication is as well as thinking about the technical words, there are also some words that people with dementia don't particularly enjoy hearing about themselves. And so again, I've mentioned DEEP, Innovations in Dementia. On their website, they have a lot of information about the communication, so how you use, and obviously the Alzheimer's Society provide a lot as well. Let's plug our group.
That's fine.
Yeah, a lot of really good information about the words that you shouldn't use, the phrases that you shouldn't use, that people with dementia have said that they don't like. But they also, on the Innovations Dementia website, and we've used it on Embed Care, have some really good documents that help you to understand how to write information for people with dementia. It's not just about the words you use, it's about how you lay it out on the paper, the size of the font, sometimes even the colour that you use.
Say colour contrast.
The colour contrast. Do you use a lot of photographs? Do you not use a lot of photographs? You know, so it helps you to understand, if you're sending information to someone, how you lay it out. There's a lot of information about how you actually conduct interviews with people. How do you set up rooms for meetings? How do you actually run the meeting? You know, making sure that they can come, that you're giving them the right support to be able to attend, enjoy it, and actually participate as they would like to, so that you're not tiring them out just by the effort of getting to your meeting and then surviving within it. So you know, have to think about that as well. So
wonderful.
Yeah, I would just add to that, when my dad took part in research, the researchers came to him, and it made a massive difference, because getting him to the venue would be quite exhausting for him, and then he might not have been able to have enough, you know, brain power to really you know, take part in the research. So we really valued that, and because my mum was working and we were working, having someone coming to us was just a lot easier practicality wise than us trying for us to get him somewhere else. I think that made a massive difference. But I think people also need to think about what might seem like really basic things, like don't have loads of background noise, don't have two people speaking to them at the same time, make sure that you're speaking, if somebody pauses, that's probably them thinking about what you've just said, and don't try and fill the space. Give them the space to process what you're saying before you answer, before you start prompting. Sorry, Jane, go for it.
I was just going to say, on the Always group that we run, or we work, I am involved with, we have cards that actually say I would like to speak. So we've got into a habit, all of us hold the card up, I would like to speak. But we've also got into, those of us who aren't living directly with dementia, that if one of the guys who has dementia holds their card up after hours, we defer to them.
Right.
Because they're not necessarily going to remember what they want to talk about after we've waffled for half an hour. So it's that bit of, we can remember what we want to say, and it might be slightly out of context, but we can catch up with that. But it's those sort of little protocols that can help make it easier for them. You know, also think about the timings of the meetings. I mean, this is all laid out in these documents, but some people, you know, they're better off earlier on, other people are better later. Yeah, some people may need to be seen at home. I know at least one guy who belongs to the Embed Care who said he actually quite likes to come to meetings because he likes the social interaction that we have. We're all very well behaved because we've been, you know, we've looked into what we do. But he also said he's on a level footing when we go to the university, because we all have to ask where the toilets are. If he's going home, he doesn't always. He feels, and that feels disabled. Whereas if he's in a strange building, and everyone's asking where the gents are or the ladies are, he just feels like one of the crowd. So again, I think we keep saying, don't make
assumptions.
Ask them.
Absolutely.
But ask them the right way.
Yeah. So those sorts of resources are available. There's a fantastic toolkit that was produced by our Dementia Voice team that goes through the things to think about when you're hosting a meeting with people affected by dementia. And those cards are also available through Alzheimer's Society if I want to speak. I think there are a couple of other options as well. Brilliant practical advice. And I think that is actually, we can make assumptions as people who, you know, are not currently conducting research, that of course they're going to understand that because they're looking in the dementia field, so they would think of all of these. But these are practical tips that are so useful to researchers, and I've been told that a lot. John, did you have anything that you wanted to add to the practical tips conversation?
No, I think we've covered most things. The practical tips, I guess, once again, come down to language, I guess, is important. So not referring to words like suffering, which just makes me cringe every time I hear that, either written or people talking about suffering with dementia. And it's surprising that's still something that comes up from time to time. It's still, you see something written down or referred to in a discussion. And also that kind of collective them is something that I kind of struggle and fight against, that those people or them or they living with dementia. Again, this is a unique experience for people living with dementia and their caregivers and loved ones. And so it's convenient sometimes to lump groups together. It's automatic. That's the kind of thing we will do. But it's I think it's a good opportunity, I think, for all anybody working in research, maybe just to stop for a moment and think before they make those generalizations or make those assumptions. It's a very easy thing to do. And I think for researchers as well, if you're talking about participants on study or patients or any of those sort of terminology, just again acknowledge that these are people with lives and histories and aspirations and dreams and visions, and again this is a very human condition, and so I think again that's just a nice memory jogger for people, that they're not just, these people are not just these people, I'm saying, are not just patients or participants or members of your study, or these are people with three-dimensional holistic lives, who've had incredible life experiences of their own and will continue to have incredible life experiences of their own. Dementia doesn't stop, life doesn't stop at dementia diagnosis. I think that's a very important message, maybe again for researchers too, is that somebody receiving a diagnosis of a dementia does not mean that there was a life before that, and then there's nothing beyond it. Then it's just a kind of coasting to the end. That's a very important point, I think, for researchers. This is just a kind of event in a life, but it's and of course will change the trajectory of lives, but it doesn't mean that visions and loves and aspirations and all of the things we all care about will not stop there. So.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Thank you, John. And I think what I'd like to add to all of that is anyone considering this career in dementia research is involving people at the very beginning, before you even get started, before you even decide what question to ask. Involving people affected by dementia is so important and will really ensure that you have the most pertinent question, and your results would hopefully end up being much more meaningful and beneficial. Amy.
Sorry, just turning my mic on. I think I'd kind of like to add to that is that I think sometimes when you see research applications come in, it feels like PPI, patient participant, well, I can't remember what it stands for.
Patient public involvement. Yeah.
That's it. Part is kind of bolted on as an afterthought, and it should be embedded. It should be an integral part of the research that you're doing. It's not just, I'll speak to a few people who live with dementia at the start, and I might have a bit of a meeting with them partway through to check I'm still on the right track, and then I'll do a public engagement activity at the end. That's not involving people living with dementia in your research. When then we as a community of people who are living with dementia or caring for people living with dementia, we need to be embedded in research right from the very beginning all the way through, and right to the very end, and have a contribution to what those outputs look like. Just picking up on what John said before, I work in academia. I know what it's like to be under pressure to produce peer-reviewed articles, but impact is more than journal articles. There are other ways to demonstrate impact, and properly doing PPI is one really good way of doing it.
Yeah, and I want to shout out as well, that includes biomedical researchers. If you're working in a lab and you're thinking, how on earth can I bring people into the lab with me? That question of what you're doing in the lab in the first place, or why you're going to go into that lab, would be a great time to have a chat with people affected by dementia. Is that question something that is meaningful to them? John?
And I agree, Anna, and absolutely, Amy, I would echo your sentiments too, and involving persons affected by dementia throughout the entire research cycle, and so even in the lab-based, of course, get people involved, ask them questions, because the actual involvement is something that raises knowledge and skills in all parties too. So as persons affected by dementia do take part in this whole kind of experience of research, they share that research with others, they talk about it with others, they're involved with other community groups and things too, and kind of the word of mouth spreads, and also involving persons with dementia and caregivers in the sharing of the results too. So when we get to the end stage of whichever research may be conducted, not forgetting that persons affected by dementia can help and would be passionate, I'm sure, to speak about the results in a kind of accessible manner, so that it's shared. If there is pressure to produce produced kind of journal articles, that's fine, but the results of those can also be disseminated and shared in much more meaningful and accessible ways by people affected by and living with dementia.
Fantastic, great point, John. Last point to Jane, because I think Adam's going to say we're done. Well, I could talk all day, but, but go for it.
I was just going to say, as Amy was saying, and John, getting people involved in the whole process. So you mentioned about me being a co-applicant on a couple of things. Well, one of the big one that I'm doing, this big program on end of life, started off with a focus group. There was a few of us there. So actually looking at what the project was going to involve. And then when we formed the PPI group, a couple of us were there for the launch. So we actually spoke on launch day. And since then, we're involved in everything that's going on, including we've got, I think, 5 PhD students. Those students are doing a lot of the interviews with people. So the PPI group, we actually proposed, well, why don't they practice on us? So just before lockdown, we all met in London, and we actually had the research assistants trying the interviews out on us, and they fed back how they felt, we fed back, and then the combined document was used to inform. And not only did it make us feel really part of the project, well, we are part of the project, but the RAs, the research assistants, really benefited, I think, because when they went out and started speaking to people, it wasn't the first time some of them had ever met someone with dementia. They'd had it, or a carer, they'd had a chance to have someone say, oh, you might want to use that word, or that was really good. In fact, most of it was positive. We've now got into a thing where every 6 months they're actually coming along and telling us about their research, asking us questions. They've had ad hoc, questions to members, because they're getting to know who we are and what we're living with or have lived with. So they can come and approach us about certain projects. One of the ladies looking at young onset, she's talked to the 2 that have got experience of young onset. It's really, really helping us as part of the team, and we feel part of the team. And we're going to be part of the dissemination very much. Watch this space, will be out there. The other big one, looking at, how do you live well? As I mentioned, we've been to Dementia Congress twice now, actually presenting the project out to the world. We're looking at various things to get it out in unusual ways, maybe theatre. So again, watch the space.
Wonderful.
And we love doing this. Please use us.
Great. I think we're going to have to wrap up now. Adam, are you going to join us to kick us off?
But no, not at all. I think I was just looking through to check I hadn't missed any questions, and there was one. I think I hadn't spotted it because it came in the chat box and not in the Q&A box. So there's a question from Madeleine, who asked, hello, I'm a biochemistry graduate. I used to work part-time in elderly care, so I had the opportunity of working with people who have dementia. I've seen the implications of the disease, and even my own grandmother is struggling. Unfortunately, understanding in overseas is limited. I thought the meeting was very promising to hear. So I guess the point here is that perhaps to address this very important point you make is that the understanding of dementia and how people are diagnosed and cared for and treated does change in different parts of the world. It is different, and we're very fortunate in the UK that we do have such a fantastic National Health Service and wonderful charities like Alzheimer Society, who do amazing work to support people living with dementia and to make sure that people get the diagnosis and the limited treatments we do have available for people. And I think the great thing about potentially a career in research is that is anything that you work and discover, whether you're working in the UK or in the US, that those findings are disseminated the world over, you know, through the publications, and if what you discover here can be used elsewhere in the world, it will be. I mean, disseminating research and making use of research findings is always a challenge. You've got to lobby and work hard to change a discovery into something that's implemented. But I think there is a real potential to do that. And what we've seen since COVID-19 came along and the pandemic is actually our research communities are working closer than ever before, because the world suddenly feels a little bit smaller. Everybody's communicating via video conference far more. And so I know certainly I've had more dealings with the US, and a lot of people are turning online. So it's also for those people who are watching who are still thinking about this or undecided by the end of the week, or if you're just a research network member, if you're a research network member that's interested in knowing more, you could literally be attending 5 or 6 different webinars every day with researchers presenting their work. They're desperate to talk about their research, so there's a real opportunity to get to know more if you want to. I know the Alzheimer's Association in the US have almost daily webinars right now with academics and healthcare professionals talking about their work.
Thank you. Yeah, well, thanks for giving us the opportunity today, Adam. I've really, really enjoyed it. I hope Amy, Jane and John have as well. And I hope all of you new researchers out there or early career researchers are going to go for it with dementia research. It's fascinating. People are so willing to get involved, and it'll make your research better if you do involve people. So that's our last message.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy the sunshine. Bye all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.